Moraes, MEP. You are one of the privileged few who attended this interview, this hearing with Mark Zuckerberg. What are your impressions?
It's nothing to do with privilege. This is the political group leaders. I'm chair of the committee that has very painstakingly brought in GDPR and e-privacy and privacy legislation. So we're there for a reason. I think it was highly significant that Mark Zuckerberg came to the Parliament, highly significant because he's not been to national parliaments, highly significant that we were able to ask him critical questions, both about Facebook behaviour, but what improvements there have been since the congressional hearings on the question of apps and the question of WhatsApp in competition, and multiple questions. Now, the implementation of GDPR and so on. The issue, I think, it was a disappointment that perhaps he was very general in his answers. He didn't really go more specifically into those answers. The format perhaps was very difficult in this sense. So I think there was a slight disappointment there. But I do believe that it was still important that he was there. The questions were able to be asked in a European Union setting. It will be followed up by a more detailed Libe hearing with senior Facebook executives, but yes, I think there was a little bit of disappointment that we didn't get more specific and detailed answers to some of these critical questions that we asked, and we do want some follow-up, and I think that's the general mood.
You brought up the question specifically about implementation of the General Data Protection Regulation, which is coming into force in just a few days' time. Are you convinced that he understands the full meaning of implementation of that regulation?
No, I mean, I asked the question that GDPR is not as easy to implement as people think. And I asked this question because I realised that for Facebook and its global reach, GDPR is quite an onerous task. And I think this idea that he very easily says that Facebook has complied is not good enough in the European Union. You need to say more about that. And also, of course, GDPR will not correct many of the problems that have been created in this so-called Facebook issue of Cambridge Analytica and so on. That has to be through e-privacy and other legislation. So first of all, I think I would have wanted a better acknowledgement of this. I would have liked a more detailed answer about it. I gave examples of where GDPR is more difficult to implement. So yes, this is very important that he was able, I think, to answer those questions in a more detailed way and not be cajoled into answering those. So I really wish there was more of that. However, I do underline it's important that he was there and that these questions were able to be asked.
Finally, you said that you wanted a response that wasn't just legal, but moral. What does that mean?
The reason I said legal and moral is because the legal compliance will be quite, if it's done properly, will be quite significant, GDPR and so on. But if there is no moral commitment to protecting citizens as opposed to exploiting their data for negative purposes, as we have seen with the Cambridge Analytica methodology, the use of apps, but also the use of the app providers and so on, the way that it was done, then the problem we're going to have is that you will not have that kind of moral line of understanding, where the line should be drawn. And I wanted to emphasize this because at the moment the European Union data protection law is a hugely higher standard than anywhere else in the world with GDPR, and I think this moral line is very important to understand because bad implementation will be, unfortunately, quite widespread. So we do need that kind of moral line as well as the legislative line.